Good evening and welcome to Season 5 of Lightning Talks. We are coming to you live from the Seattle Aquarium on the shores of Puget Sound in the traditional and contemporary territories of the Coast Salish people. Thank you for joining us from wherever you call home. My name is Nora Nickham, my pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Senior Director of Conservation Programs here at the aquarium. Our subject tonight is salmon, which are all around vitally important fish. Salmon are critical to the cultures, health, and well-being of Coast Salish peoples. Salmon play a key role in the ecosystem and the economy and are an important food source for wildlife and humans. And their impact is felt far and wide, given their long, arduous journeys from freshwater to the ocean and back. Now, as you may have seen in the pre-show trivia, maybe you got this right, but there are 5 species of Pacific salmon. And you may know there is a fun trick you can use to remember what those 5 species are using your hand. So we've got chum, which rhymes with thumb. We've got sockeye, so you can imagine pointing at your finger with your eye with your index finger. The tallest finger, the middle finger, is the king salmon, also known as the Chinook. We've got silver, like the rings on some fingers, but that's also called coho. And then we've got pink salmon for pinky finger. So we've got 5 fingers for that memory trick, 5 species of Pacific salmon. And now we have 5 great speakers to tell us more. If you've never attended a Lightning Talks event, here's what you can expect. We've got 5 speakers who have 5 minutes each to share one big idea and not 1 second more. So they are going to get warnings at 1 minute, at 30 seconds, and then at time. And if they go over, they get this. So we'll see if any lightning strikes tonight. Now, we like to keep things moving, so we won't stop after each speaker for questions. But if you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat. And at the end of the evening, we'll bring all of our speakers back for a Q&A conversation. You can also submit questions via this link or the QR code if you don't have access to the chat. If you enjoy what you see tonight and would like to support the Seattle Aquarium, please consider a donation. When you donate to the Seattle Aquarium, you're joining us in our mission of inspiring conservation of our marine environment. And if you haven't yet, please click like and subscribe. Now we have a really fascinating program this evening, and I can't wait to get started. So let's go ahead and do that. Please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Katie Engel. Katie works with the Seattle Aquarium's field programs, including the Beach Naturalist and Cedar River Salmon Journey programs. They've been going to the Cedar River to see the salmon runs and share salmon information with river visitors for 8 years now. They love connecting people to this amazing wildlife migration, which we get to witness right here in our local rivers. And Katie is going to share more about one of those special salmon with us tonight. Are you ready, Katie?
I'm ready.
Great. Can't wait to learn more. Your slides look great.
Great. Well, hi, everyone. Like Nora mentioned, I'm part of the Cedar River Salmon Journey program, which is a really special program. It's an educational program where we go out to the Cedar River, located in Renton and Maple Valley in King County, Washington. And we watch the salmon as they migrate and talk to folks about it. And today I want to talk to you about 3 very special fish. So I'll start by welcoming you to the Cedar River. The Cedar River flows into Lake Washington at its southernmost point, through the Lake Washington Ship Canal, and then out to Puget Sound through the Ballard Locks. This is also the path that salmon take when they migrate out to the ocean, if that is what they choose to do. The Cedar River is home to 3 of our Pacific salmon species: Chinook, coho, and sockeye. But today, the 3 fish I'm talking to you about are actually all sockeye, or at least different life histories of sockeye. So sockeye is in the scientific name Oncorhynchus nerca. Try to say that 10 times fast. And I want to talk to you about 3 different ways the Oncorhynchus nerca can live. So our first is our kind of classic anadromous sockeye. This is our ocean-going sockeye. It's the one we think of when we think of salmon. They are born in the Cedar River. They go downstream. They actually live in Lake Washington for about a year, and then they go out to the Pacific Ocean, live there for a few years, and come back to spawn in the Cedar River and turn this like bright, amazing red color. So that's kind of our classic. The next I want to talk to you about is a fish called kokanee. You may have heard of this. This is a landlocked sockeye. So this one actually does not go out to the ocean at all. It does its whole life cycle in fresh water, in rivers, starting in rivers, and then out to lakes and back. The Cedar River does not have kokanee, but other rivers in the Lake Washington watershed do. They also turn this bright red color when they're getting to spawn. Now, the next fish I have for you is a new fish, or new to me, and there's not much we know about it. And this is called a residual sockeye. So a few years ago, I was on the river and we kept on seeing these small green fish. And we're like, what are these? They're salmon shaped. They're hanging out with all the salmon, but they look different. Well, it turns out they're what we call residual sockeye, and they're so unknown that I don't even have a good picture of them for you. So in this circle, that little shadow, that's the fish I'm talking about. And next to it is a spawning ocean-going sockeye. So residual sockeye, they also don't go out to the ocean, but they live their whole lives in freshwater, but they're not a separate population like kokanee. They can be progeny of our ocean-going sockeye. They just, for some reason, don't decide to go out to the ocean. So when we think about going to the ocean in the first place, salmon go to the ocean to eat a lot. And sockeye specifically eat foods that are really high in carotenoid-rich they're really high in carotenoids, which is the pigment that gives them that bright red color. So they eat things like krill. So our residual sockeye, they're not going to the ocean, so they're not getting all of that krill, and they're not getting as big. That's why they stay really small. And so they're not getting that red color. They're not getting that carotenoids, which kind of begs the question, well, if our residual sockeye who don't go to the ocean don't get red because they're not eating carotenoid-rich foods, what about kokanee? Kokanee still get that bright red color, but they're not going to the ocean to eat all that carotenoid-rich zooplankton. So the answer is that kokanee, they're a separate population. They've evolved for thousands of years, and part of that evolution has been to be really efficient at extracting the carotenoids from the foods that they do eat. And it turns out that they are about 3 times as efficient as our ocean-going sockeye at extracting and using those carotenoids so that they can get that bright red color, because it turns out that the bright red color was really helpful for spawning. And so the ones that were bright red were successful and passed that on. And so I hope that this just gives you a little insight into the diversity and amazingness that can happen in even just one species of salmon. And I just want to end by saying a huge thank you to all of our program volunteers, funders, partners, and staff, and for our Lightning Talks team for having me be here. And I'm it.
Great. Thank you, Katie. Well, I love how you had a little mini mystery to solve there, figuring out what those little green fish were. And I've been wondering if there's another mystery, or if you know the answer to why those residual sockeye, those little green fish, do not go out into the ocean and just hang around in the freshwater.
That's such a good question. So part of it could be that, so on their journey out to the ocean, like I mentioned, they have to go through the Lake Washington Ship Canal and out through the Ballard Locks. And that can be a pretty treacherous place for salmon. The water is pretty warm and shallow. There's a lot of development along that waterfront. And so it's not the most inviting place for salmon to go. Plus, if they have enough food in Lake Washington, which it turns out there is enough food for them there, they might decide, oh, hey, I've got enough food. I'm not really tempted to go this way. I might just stay and hang out. All that being said, that's just kind of what we're thinking, but we actually don't know very much about these residual sockeye. So what they're doing is still a little bit of a mystery.
Well, that is fun. Maybe someday we will solve it, but it's fun to have some mysteries remaining out there for us.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you again, Katie. So Katie will be back for Q&A. So don't forget to add your questions for Katie to the chat, or use the QR code on the screen. And in the meantime, we're going to welcome our next speaker on the Lightning Talk stage, Celeste Curran. Celeste is a PhD student with the Quantitative Fisheries Research Group and the Terrestrial and Freshwater Conservation Lab at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, BC. Celeste's doctoral research explores long-term trends in climate and marine ecosystems with a focus on the changing ecology of Pacific salmon. So Celeste is going to be sharing some pretty cool ways we can see the effects of salmon on Pacific Northwest forests. Take it away, Celeste.
Right. Well, thanks so much. That was great, Katie. That was a really wonderful introduction to these brilliantly colored fish. So did not know that about the residual sockeye. I want to know more. And sockeye, like a lot of other Pacific salmon, like all other species of Pacific salmon, they spend the majority of their lives at sea. After they migrate up the coast as juveniles, they'll spend on average 2 to 3 years feeding and growing. And here they'll accumulate as much as 99% of their body mass in the ocean. So we're going to be talking a little bit about how these nutrients affect the terrestrial systems that they all come back to. Every fall, when these salmon migrate back to their freshwater spawning systems, they're carrying with them thousands of kilograms of marine-derived nutrients. This is video from one of the Chum and Pink River systems that are lab monitors on the Central Coast in Heiltsuk Territory. And like a lot of similar systems, these rivers are usually quite nutrient depleted. So these huge annual pulses of salmon really make the forests on the Pacific Northwest vibrant and unique. They bring ocean nutrients to terrestrial systems, and they support hundreds of different species. Many of these, like predators and scavengers, will eat only the choice parts of the fish when salmon are abundant, and they'll leave the rest of the carcass to decompose in the forest. Wolves, for example, here we go. Wolves, for example, will eat only the head of the fish. So you'll actually see piles of headless salmon on the sides of the banks, and that's why you'll know there's wolves around. And they'll just leave the rest of the salmon to decompose in the forest. And the nutrients from these carcasses, they get incorporated into the terrestrial systems by a lot of different pathways. And their effects can be traced through the surrounding environment. Studies have found that along salmon streams with abundant returns, that trees experienced increased growth rates, and you can actually measure how the salmon have been incorporated into the forest. Studies have found as much as 36% of nitrogen in the leaves of these trees can be traced back to marine origin, which is really interesting. Salmon also alter communities of aquatic macroinvertebrates in their spawning streams. They have been found in studies to increase fruit production in salmon berries and leaf area of different riparian plants, and also change floral displays of wildflowers in estuaries. They've even been linked to increased densities of songbirds along salmon streams, most likely due to higher abundances of aquatic and terrestrial insects when there's large salmon runs occurring. So these cyclical spawning events are really drastically shaping riparian ecosystems. And we found that when salmon return in really high abundances, their effects on Pacific Northwest forests can actually be picked up by a satellite. Our lab tested this at the Adams River in Secwepemc Nation territory. It's home to one of the most famous sockeye runs in North America. Every 4 years, there are these huge cycles of sockeye abundance, which can be 100 to 1,000 times greater than other years. And so it was a really nice place to test this. And using satellite imagery, you can track changes in something called NDVI. It's just a measure of greenness or photosynthetic activity that you can get from satellite images. And you can see that after years of high salmon abundance, there are increases in the greenness of forests along these rivers. What was really interesting is that you can actually pick up these signals of fertilization from the salmon on the forest as much as 90 meters away from the riverbank. So these nutrients are somehow being transported deeper than you might expect. And also this greening fertilization effect doesn't show up until the following growing season. So these salmon are coming back in the fall, and that's not when the trees really want to grow, especially at northern latitudes. So the forest is holding these nutrients in reserve until they really need them in the spring. This is all really important. We want these trees to be growing at full capacity. They're more effective carbon sinks. They're more important forests. You know, we want them to be doing their best. And when these salmon, or when these trees are growing at their full capacity, they're also improving stream habitat by providing more shade to these rivers and more woody debris for the next generation of salmon. I'm going to leave it there. I'm really excited to hear the rest of our talks coming on. And thanks everyone for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Celeste. I was just thinking about the brown bear live cam in Katmai National Park that you can see on explore.org, and how you can see bears going to all the trouble to catch a salmon, and then they take one bite and then they don't finish it. And it seems like a waste, but it's really not a waste. It's really important that they're catching it and that they're leaving other parts of that salmon for all those other animals to eat. And it's pretty cool. You can see their impact from space. But I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how those nutrients get 90 meters into the forest from the stream.
Yeah, that was something I found really surprising. But there was some other studies that also looked at salmon nutrients effects on forests, and they found similar things, that up to 125 meters into the forest, you could see the salmon effect. And so it's not fully known, but there could be a lot of different ways. There's scavengers like these bears, they'll toss the things up, and often they'll drag them pretty deep into the forest. And there's also subsurface water flows. And there's some really cool research coming out about mycorrhizal networks and how those might transport nutrients through the soil. So it's definitely something I'm interested in looking more into.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Celeste. And I hope everyone will put some great questions for you in the chat or using that QR code. And in the meantime, we're going to turn to our next speaker, Jason Gubatayo. Jason is the manager of activities on Sealaska land related to natural resources. His focus is on working with local communities to develop opportunities for cultural and economic benefit. Jason has a degree in environmental systems and combines his in-the-field forestry experience with academic study to help manage Sealaska's resources respectfully and effectively. So looking forward to your presentation, Jason. Take it away.
Yes, thank you, Nora, for the introduction. As you said, my name is Jason Gubatayo. I am the general manager of natural resources for Sealaska Corporation, and I live here in beautiful Ketchikan, Alaska. If you've never heard of Sealaska, I just wanted to take a minute to describe what it is. We are an Alaska Native corporation with over 26,000 indigenous shareholders, and we own 362,000 acres of the world's largest temperate rainforest. We're a for-profit corporation. We are similar to like a publicly traded corporation in a lot of ways, but one way that we are very different is that you can't buy shares to become a member of Sealaska. You can become a member from your ancestral ties to this place. So, for example, my grandmother was an original shareholder. My father's a shareholder. I'm a shareholder. My children will be shareholders. But the corporation, our land is our greatest asset, and it is really the foundation of our corporation. So, but what are we doing around salmon? Why are we here? Why are we part of this lightning talk? I could put up stats showing that salmon populations are in decline, and I think there's this common misconception out there that Southeast Alaska is like the mecca for sport fishing. There's really healthy populations here, well-managed fish stocks, really a thriving commercial fishing industry. But the reality is it's just not that way anymore. Personally, in Ketchikan, we used to have a king salmon derby, right? The community would go out and try to catch the largest king salmon, win a prize. It was something that was a lot of fun, but in recent years, we've had to discontinue that. It's just not right to be putting additional pressure on a population of salmon that are already seeing a lot of stress. Another example, popular sockeye salmon stream near town used to be able to harvest like 100 sockeye for a household, and now the regulation it's a limit of 20. So anyway, there are declines that are happening, and they're very real, and they're affecting the way that we lived here for a very long time. So what is our goal? At Sealaska, we have this 362,000 acres. We have over 350 miles of salmon stream on Sealaska land, and we want these streams functioning at their highest potential to support wild salmon. We know there are many factors that are impacting salmon returns, and a lot of them are hard out of control or out of Sealaska's control. But one thing that is in our control is our land, and so we want it operating at its highest potential. How are we doing it? This is one project I wanted to highlight. This is a culvert on the left of the slide here. It's on a forest road. It was installed before there were really a lot of protections on salmon streams. And what's happening, it's impeding fish access through the road. So there's about 3 kilometers of fish habitat that was above this structure that fish were having trouble accessing. So we identified this as an issue in April of this year, and we set a target of September 1st. We want a structure in place. This road is important to the local community. We want a structure in place where a fish that wants to return to this habitat can pass through and access those 3 kilometers above. And we did it. It was a pretty aggressive timeline. We did it through a lot of collaboration and partnership. It took a lot of people working together to make it happen. But what was funny about this project was the engineers on the job like to have about 5 to 6 months to plan and design before we even break ground. But we were really aggressive. We wanted to see salmon swimming through this thing in the fall return. So we were able to accomplish it in 5 months. We did 5 projects like this. This year, we're going to do 10 next year like this. And, that's the goal, and so on and so forth. We want to amplify. And so it's critical that we meet a quickly changing world with immediate action. I see that I'm running out of time quickly. I'm just going to skip right through this next slide. But our vision, we want to use our lands to inspire the recreation of balanced ecosystems all over the world. We think that what we can do on our land, what we can do in partnership with local tribes, other landowners in this region, we can learn from what other people are doing around the world, and we can hopefully cause bigger impacts and wider spread impact throughout the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. It's so inspiring to see that difference you all have made, and so quickly, and thinking about those really tangible benefits for salmon and for the broader ecosystem, as we've been talking about how important they are to the other animals and to the forest and to the people who live in that area. Now, I know you have a personal passion for Southeast Alaska ecology, so I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about how that passion has brought you to where you are now doing this important work.
It's growing up here, my brothers and I, we used to chase little humpies through the creeks, and we'd build little, pools and try to capture them and grab them out of the creek with our hands. And, we'd fish the creeks, and just having those experiences as a child really got woven into me and who I am. So growing up, I just always had a connection to this place, and I've always wanted to work on the land, and working on, my land as a shareholder is really important to me. And I just want my kids to have, the same opportunities I had growing up. I've got 2 young kids. I've got a 4-year-old or soon to be 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I just want, when they're my age, that they can think back on their childhood the same way that I do. So thanks.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're doing a lot of things that will make it very likely that they will get to have that experience. And that's really special. So thank you, Jason. And if anyone has questions for Jason, remember to put them in the chat or use that QR code. And we are going to welcome our next speaker, who is Mendy Harlow. In her role as Executive Director of the Hood Canal Salmon Enhancement Group, Mendy oversees habitat restoration, environmental education, and research activities. She's passionate about making connections between people and the world around them so we can all enjoy healthy ecosystems for generations to come. So you ready, Mendy?
I am.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Nora. I have to say I've been really amped up all day about the opportunity to give this presentation about the importance of estuaries to salmon because they play such a crucial role in juvenile salmon survival. I work for the Hood Canal Salmon Enhancement Group, and we are one of 14 regional fisheries enhancement groups throughout the state of Washington. We focus on habitat restoration, environmental education, and ecosystem research. Our region includes all of Hood Canal, but there are 13 other regions throughout the state of Washington. So most of us know that estuaries are the place on our landscape where fresh water meets the salt water. Either from rivers or streams, that fresh water mixes with the salt water and really provides an important place for young salmon, despite the fact that they reside in them for such a short period of time and very seasonally. There are really three main features that make estuaries functionally significant to salmon. First, they are a place where juvenile salmon stay for a bit to feed and grow a little bit bigger. Second, they provide a great space to avoid predators while they are growing a little bit bigger. And then finally, they go through physiological changes that are required to transition from the freshwater into the saltwater environment. So estuaries are very productive environments because they receive a constant influx of nutrients from both rivers or creeks and the marine environment. This mix of nutrients creates a diverse environment where a wide variety of plants and animals thrive. They're not only nurseries for salmon, but also for numerous other species, some of which are food for juvenile salmon. So juvenile salmon spend time in their natal estuaries eating a variety of insects, crustaceans, and other small animals such as zooplankton. As they get bigger and stronger, they become less likely to be eaten by a predator and more likely to survive as they enter the open ocean. Estuaries are also environments that endure severe physical impacts from wind and wave action and flooding from rivers and creeks. These physical impacts also create turbid waters with channel complexity that provide good hiding places for juvenile salmon to avoid predators. When juvenile salmon enter estuaries, they undergo physiological changes that help them adapt to life at sea. While living in the freshwater environment, juveniles have parr marks that help them blend into the sticks and stones of their surroundings. So they might look like this. But then when they enter an estuary, they start to go through smoltification, where they start to turn silver so that they can blend into the open ocean environment. The silver color reflects all colors around them like a mirror, so they are hidden in their environment. This can also help distract predators when they are schooled up in groups by creating bright flashes of light when they change direction. They will also develop a dark back and a light belly, which is called countershading. This makes it so that they are not as visible to predators that may be hunting them from the sky or from below. In addition, their gills change so that they can dispose of excess sodium that they will be exposed to in the saltwater environment. When they come back to estuaries as adults, their gills go through that same process again, but in reverse so that they can enter fresh water again. So my organization works to restore estuaries by removing levees, tide gates, and road infrastructure that hinder the movement of tidal waters that benefit the growth of juvenile salmon, like this one at the tip of the Hood Canal that's called the Union River Estuary. One project that we're working on implementing right now is in the Duckabush River Estuary. So the Duckabush River starts in the Olympic Mountains and is one of the largest river drainages on the west side of Hood Canal. And it is an important river for many salmon species, such as the ESA-listed Hood Canal summer chum, Chinook, and steelhead. We are working with the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Army Corps of Engineers to elevate Highway 101 across the estuary so that the tidal function will again be restored for juvenile salmon and other wildlife. Currently, there are two very short bridges that span two of the Duckabush River channels, with a lot of fill material making up the rest of the roadway. The fact that the river is forced into two channels makes it dangerous for salmon because predators like seals or cormorants will wait for them there. the old highway that currently exists on fill material placed in the estuary will be replaced with a new highway that will be elevated to allow for natural flow, which is not only good for fish, but also a multitude of other aquatic and terrestrial wildlife species, because salmon are a keystone species that many other organisms rely on to survive. So I will end it with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mendy. I was just thinking about, I had the chance to visit that Ducklebush estuary this past summer, and it was just so exciting to see the road there on top of the estuary and know that not too long from now it will be lifted up and it'll be reconnected and restored for salmon and those other species that you mentioned. So it's going to be one of those really great news stories when that happens, and it's great to know that that will happen.
Yes.
I wanted to talk about how you lead one of the regional fisheries enhancement groups. And in fact, everyone in Washington has one of those that's active right in their neighborhood. So I'm wondering, for those who are in Washington and listening tonight to Lightning Talks, are there ways they could get involved?
Yes, definitely. So all of the regional fisheries enhancement groups are nonprofit organizations that rely heavily on volunteers to do a lot of our work. So we have volunteer groups that go out and plant trees in restored areas, or go out and control invasive plants and then replant native plants. But then we also rely a lot on donations from members of our community to help support our education programs. So you can just Google regional fisheries enhancement groups and you'll come up with a list of all of the regional fisheries enhancement groups in the state, and you can select the one that's in your area and get in touch with them to either find volunteer opportunities, which also include board member volunteer opportunities as well. So, or make donations online. So
Great.
Thank you for asking about that.
Yeah, opportunities for all different skill sets that can make a difference for salmon. Great. Well, thank you, Mendy. I'm going to introduce our final speaker for this evening, Rain Billings. Rain is the Ocean Policy Associate for the Seattle Aquarium and a graduate student at the University of Alaska. She's currently working with the Center for Whale Research to study how orca behavior can be used in conservation policy. And Rain tonight has some fun facts to share with us about the relationship between salmon and orcas. So take it away, Rain.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I just want to start by saying thank you for allowing me the chance to speak about orcas and their relationship to salmon. Orcas are some of my favorite beings in the entire world, so I love getting the chance to speak about them and teach everyone else about them as well. So we're going to start off with a pretty basic fact, which is, why do southern resident orcas eat Chinook salmon? So for starters, Chinook salmon is most of their diet. It's about 70%, sometimes up to 80%, just depending on the exact season. And they prefer Chinook salmon because Chinook salmon is the largest species, and it has an average weight of about 30 pounds per fish and ranges between 40 and 60 inches. So essentially, it's the most energetic bang for their buck. They can catch a large fish instead of having to catch a lot of tiny fish. Chinook also has a really high fat content, so it provides a lot of calories for the orcas. And being able to catch large, healthy Chinook salmon allows the orcas to spend less time foraging and more time socializing and traveling. They don't only eat Chinook, they do also eat other species of salmon, particularly chum and coho, especially in the wintertime when they're more likely to be here in Puget Sound. They will also eat other species of fish, such as halibut and lingcod, sometimes even skates, which are kind of like stingrays. So pretty cool, not something we usually think about with them. And for killer whales, something that's really interesting is that their dietary choices are a form of culture. So they actually are eating what their mothers and family members are teaching them to eat. So it's kind of like having a favorite family recipe. So how does an orca know if it's chasing a Chinook salmon as opposed to other species of salmon? So they mainly rely on echolocation to find their food, and their echolocation is very sophisticated. Most fish have this organ called a swim bladder, which is just an organ filled with gas that helps the fish maintain its buoyancy. Because all species of salmon are going to be different sizes from each other, the swim bladder size is also different. So their echolocation is actually so sophisticated that they can tell the difference between different salmon species just by looking at that swim bladder through their echolocation. That's the main way they're telling. When they're down searching, it can be several hundred feet below the surface. They can't really see. So they really are relying on the echolocation. So how many salmon do southern resident orcas need to eat? So it's estimated that the average southern resident orca needs to eat between 18 and 25 adult salmon every day, with the adult males needing to eat more than females and juveniles. In terms of pounds of salmon, that's between 200 and 400 pounds every day, which is the equivalent of an adult male lion or a vending machine. So they're eating the weight of a vending machine every single day. And for the entire population, this is equivalent to about 1,400 adult salmon every single day, or about 500,000 adult salmon every single year. So they need to eat quite a lot. So why do southern residents share the fish that they catch? So they share their prey regardless of size. So everything that they catch, every salmon could easily be consumed by just one orca, but they still choose to share. After they catch the fish, the whale will resurface, and then usually what they're going to do is start rapidly shaking that fish to break it into multiple pieces to share. Especially the females and juveniles are the ones doing the sharing. Most sharing happens between the matriline, which is going to be the direct family. So that's going to be the mother and her children. So that's where most of the sharing is happening, and it's especially done by adult females. So it's thought that prey sharing or sharing their food is a way to assist with making sure that the mother's offspring survives, and it also strengthens the social bonds between the different families. So how did we learn that orcas eat salmon? So in the 1970s, we started doing what's known as photo identification studies. So that is going to be studies where researchers are taking pictures of the orcas and they can identify them all as individuals. And that showed us that there's two distinct types of orca that live here in Washington. So there's the southern resident population that eats salmon. That's what we're talking about tonight. And there is also the Biggs killer whales or transient killer whales that eats marine mammals. So we didn't actually learn that they eat salmon until the mid to late 70s and early 80s. So pretty recent. We also didn't realize how much they depend on Chinook salmon specifically until the 2000s. Where studies shown that the abundance of Chinook salmon directly determines the distribution and abundance of the southern resident orcas. Nowadays, there's a lot of different ways to study the diet of orcas, everything from collecting fecal samples to collecting actual remains of the prey at the surface. And it's really fascinating because when we have these DNA samples of the prey, we can actually see what river that salmon originated from, just from collecting those prey samples. So pretty
Rain, I'm so happy that we managed to get a lightning strike. I'm sorry it ended your presentation, but you were doing great and you did get to
it's fine. Yep, I was right at the end, so that was perfect. That was my last sentence.
Excellent. Well, I just think it's so cool that orcas can tell if a salmon is a Chinook or not by the echoing sound wave. And I'm curious, let's say an orca is in hot pursuit of a fish that they know is a Chinook. How hard is it for them to catch it? Do you know what their success rate is?
So it's pretty fascinating because it's actually very difficult for them to catch the salmon, which is something that not a lot of people expect. So there was a recent study published by the University of Washington that came out in September of this year, and it found that for the females, their success rate is only about 10%, whereas for the males, it's about 5%. So really low success rates. And it's really interesting comparing that to the Biggs orcas or the transient orcas, because when those whales are hunting harbor seals, especially, their success rate is over 90%. So there's a striking difference between the success rates of the two populations of orcas here. And it's really difficult for them to catch salmon. And it's really correlated with noise levels in the ocean, which is why we have a lot of emphasis on noise levels here in the state of Washington.
Yeah, because they need to catch so many salmon. So if their odds aren't good, we need to do what we can to make those odds better. And for example, reducing boat noise can help them hear that echo better and not get distracted.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Rain. So this time Rain is not going anywhere. We are going to bring all of our speakers back to the Lightning Talk stage for some questions and answers. So please feel free to keep dropping those great questions into the chat. I have seen a couple already that I want to bring forward, but first I'm wondering if all of you, our fantastic speakers, have any questions you would like to ask each other. Any burning questions? All right, I'm going to jump into some questions then. So Katie, there are some questions about the residual sockeye. I think a lot of our listeners had never heard of these residual sockeye, just like you know, you had been out on the Cedar River for quite a few years before you saw them and figured out that mystery. So one question is, can those residual sockeye spawn with the sockeye that went out to the ocean and came back?
Yeah, great question. So I will kind of preface all of my answers with, I may not know any of the answers of these questions because residuals are such a new thing that people are noticing and thinking about. So to answer this specific question, which is, can they spawn with the ocean-going sockeye? The overall answer still is, unfortunately, I'm not sure, but I will say that we watched these small fish hanging out with and, you know, doing what looks like spawning behaviors right next to the ocean-going sockeye in the Cedar River. So they were all hanging out right next to each other, which just gives me an inkling that maybe they might be doing some spawning behaviors with the other salmon.
Okay. One other question about those residual sockeye. Do we know if the residual sockeye that are spawning are the same age as the ones that went out to the ocean for a while and then came back? Are they waiting the same amount of time?
Yeah, so this is also a good question. And I think this question can lead to us thinking about, you know, the diversity of salmon as a whole, right? I talked about 3 types of sockeye, but really, salmon do a lot of different things. We talk about, oh, you know, they go out and they live in the ocean for 2 to 3 years, they come back. But sometimes they come back after just 1 year, and we call those jacks. And so even within just thinking about like ocean-going sockeye, there is a variety of ages even in one spawning cycle. So that must be true for our residuals as well. So salmon as a whole, they're diverse. They do a lot of different things, which is why they're so cool and interesting.
Yeah. Well, I hope those who are in this area will go next year to the Cedar River and talk with you or others there and maybe spot some of those residual sockeye.
Please do. October, come down.
October. Yeah. It'll be here before we know it. So Rain, there's some questions about orcas and salmon. And one thing I hear a lot is if there aren't a lot of salmon and there are lots of harbor seals, why don't the southern residents start just hunting harbor seals instead? And similarly, there was a question like, if it's so hard to get those salmon, why are they hunting them? What would it take for them to, is it possible for them to hunt anything else?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. And honestly, the answer is just at this point, the resident orcas and the Biggs orcas are evolutionarily speaking very different. We do not think that these 2 ecotypes of whales have interbred in several 100,000 years. So in many ways, you can think of it like a cat and a dog. They have different diets because they're basically like different animals. We consider them to be the same species as humans, but for all intents and purposes for their societies, they live completely different lives. So when we're talking about diets, one of the ways that impacts is they actually have different shaped teeth. So the teeth of the southern resident orcas are a lot rounder, whereas the teeth of the Biggs orcas or the transient orcas are sharper and actually curved to the back, more like a shark's teeth, like you might imagine. Because they're doing more like ripping and tearing of those marine mammals as they eat them. They also have totally different stomach enzymes. So if a southern resident orca were to catch and eat a harbor seal, it probably would not be able to digest that animal. If it did, it would have a very upset stomach. So at this point, it's just hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. And, you know, they rely a lot on salmon, but especially in recent years, as the salmon populations have been declining, we have been doing a lot of studies that have shown they eat lots of other fish as well. So yes, they do tend to focus on salmon. That is, what they have evolved to eat, but they are eating other species of fish as well. But it's very likely that at least in our lifetimes, we will not see them change to eat marine mammals.
Okay. So we need to just make sure there's plenty of salmon for them. Keep up the salmon habitat restoration efforts that we're all doing for so many reasons, so many parts of the ecosystem. One other question for you, Rain, about the orcas. Do you know at what age an orca starts to catch, how old would they need to be to catch their first salmon on their own?
Yeah, so to catch their first salmon on their own, I don't know if we know exactly what age. They start eating solid food around a year to a year and a half old, and that's going to be mainly from the mother catching the salmon and sharing it. From the studies that we have done on prey sharing in specific, we don't believe that juveniles are doing a lot of hunting on their own. We believe it's mainly, their older siblings, whales that are, older than about 10 years old, and the mothers that are really sharing all of their food. And that's why prey sharing is such an important thing to study, because it really gives us this insight to learn and understand how these juveniles are getting their food, how they're sharing their food among the entire population. They really have a fascinating culture. But yeah, they really don't start hunting their own food until they're a lot older.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take us to Alaska, Jason, with a couple questions for you. So you mentioned that you hope to inspire with what you're finding works in your region, inspire other efforts to address this urgent problem of salmon declines. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the connections you're making to groups working on this in other places. And there was a question in the chat about whether your efforts are currently coordinating with any programs in other states.
So it's a relatively new mission for us that we've adopted just within the last 12 months. It's been something that we, as an organization, we've been really contemplating and strategizing how to act on it. But yeah, we're kind of focused regionally right now and building those relationships and building those connections and coordinating with the people that are doing a lot of this work already in Southeast Alaska and trying to figure out, okay, what status is our land in, and then how can we work within a lot of good work already happening. But yeah, we're getting to this point where it's there's a lot of lessons already learned in the Northwest area, and we would love to be building those relationships in that network so that we can be bringing that knowledge here and vice versa.
Wonderful. There was also a question about how Washington State has a program to correct fish passage barriers, and some that indigenous tribes here in Washington are involved with, and there's some state and federal funding for that. Is there something like that in Alaska too?
There are, and we've been plugging in as many resources as we can and trying to build capacity, because 362,000 acres is actually a pretty small portion of the whole forest here, but it takes a lot of work, from assessment to finalizing, and something that I wanted to kind of re-express too while I have the stage. I think there's this balance of production and doing and perfection. And so we're trying to also find, what is that sweet spot? This concept of is 90% good enough? C's get degrees, right? We don't want to be getting C's, but can we get to 90% and do much more at 90% than if we're taking things to 100%? So anyway, yes, there are funding opportunities. We're looking at as many as we can.
Great. Well, Mendy, there's a couple of questions for you. So one of them reminds me a little bit about the question of, how do orcas tell what kind of salmon they're chasing? Do those baby juvenile salmon, how can they tell what they're going to try to eat between zooplankton and phytoplankton, and how do they find what would be good for them? Do you know?
Yeah, so I don't think they actually distinguish. They find particles in the water and go after them. They're not particularly after any different type of phytoplankton or zooplankton. They're just eating what's in the water in front of them.
Okay. But then we have to make sure those aren't microplastics, right?
Yeah,
Try
yeah,
and
very
help
true.
keep that water healthy. So whatever little things they're going after are actually food.
Yes.
There was another question, someone who lives near a creek that feeds into the Hood Canal and
cool.
wondering what property owners can do or what they should or should not do to help salmon if they have that kind of connection.
Wow, that's a really great question. So one thing that's really important if you have property that's on the edge of a creek or a river is to make sure that there's ample vegetation growing along the stream side. So that provides really great shade for salmon during the summertime. There are a lot of species of salmon or a few species of salmon that live in the creeks during the summertime, and they really need cool water in order to survive. The dissolved oxygen in the water actually decreases as the temperature increases. So juvenile salmon can actually suffocate if the water is too warm. So having ample stream side vegetation, which provides shade for salmon, really keeps that water temperature low. So that's one thing that's really important to do. But then also making sure that your, runoff from your driveway isn't going directly into the creeks and streams by your house as well. So those are two really important.
And that's a good point, that even those of us who don't have a creek, right at our property, there are things we can do as we go about our daily lives. And Katie, I bet this is something that comes up in your Cedar River salmon journey conversations. What are some of the things that you tell people maybe who don't live next to Puget Sound or the Salish Sea or a creek? What can they still do to help salmon?
Yeah, what a great question. So there's lots of things that we can do to help salmon. So one of them is like when we're thinking about the Cedar River is what gives Greater Seattle area almost all of its drinking water. And it's also a salmon river. So even just water conservation is a big thing, saving a lot of that water for the salmon. Other things would be, pollution mitigation and trying to use natural products in your home and your yard so that, there's not a lot of chemicals going into the runoff and into our storm drains. And then, voting with salmon in mind, doing community efforts like restoration projects and, removing invasive plants, planting native plants, all sorts of things. So no matter what level you are or what skills you have, there are things that you can do that can help salmon.
Awesome. Well, Celeste, I'm turning to you now. There was one question. I don't know if you'll know the answer to this. Do you know why wolves like the head of the salmon?
Yeah. From what I understand, the brain is very fatty, and high fat content is always good when you're trying to survive. And also that there are parasites that are specific to salmon and specifically harmful to wolves. Also dogs. So if you have your dogs around salmon rivers, don't let them eat. So
Okay.
From what I understand, there are specific parasites that the wolves really want to avoid, so they stick to just the head to get the most nutrients possible and avoid any of the damage. The bears don't care as much; they'll eat whatever.
Okay. Yeah. Very interesting. I'm curious, you've used various methods to look at salmon nutrients and how they affect the ecosystem. What is the next research question you have or, would like to try and dig into?
Yeah, well, right now I'm actually looking more at the marine phase of salmon life. So we're looking at some really beautiful data that's been collected from fisheries over the last 100 years. So growth data from scales, archives of salmon scales, and looking at how sockeye growth has changed at sea. So looking at changes in climate and growth and seeing if we can find out what might be driving growth declines in more recent times.
Okay. That is so interesting. Maybe you can come back to our future lightning talks and tell us what you find out. There have been some questions in the chat, curiosity about how many salmon are there out there. And I'm thinking, I don't know if anyone has, the biggest answer to that question, but Jason, you mentioned a bunch of statistics you could put up, and I'm wondering if you have any information about numbers, or how many do you see coming back, or have you seen an increase after some of those restoration projects, or is it too early to see those impacts?
I'm the wrong person to ask, really. I think my expertise is in like land management and administration over, fish biology. But some of the streams we've been looking at, it is really cool. It's like in the hundreds. Some of these are small streams, right? Every stream matters. No stream too small. But no, as far as like total number of fish out there or fish runs numbers, I don't have a great answer for that.
Yeah. Well, we know they're going down, and they're hard to count when they're out there in the ocean. Mendy, I know that there's hope that with the Duckabush Estuary Restoration Project, the number of salmon coming back to the Duckabush and spawning up there will go up. And can you tell us more about what the projections are, or just the hopes for which salmon might benefit and how much?
Yeah, so definitely the salmon species that utilize estuaries the most. So in Hood Canal, we have an ESA listed species called Hood Canal summer chum, and summer chum salmon spend a significant part of their juvenile phase in the estuary growing big. And so it's a really important project for Hood Canal summer chum just because of the amount of time that they utilize the estuaries. So another species that uses estuaries is Chinook, which we know are, as Rain mentioned, very important to orca. So those two species specifically, we're expecting larger returns post-project because of the amount of available estuary habitat for those juveniles.
Great. And there were some nice headlines recently about Hood Canal chum doing better after some other restoration efforts. And so it's really nice to see that these projects that people have been working so hard on with a lot of collaboration can have benefits. Are those other projects that you've been tracking too or working on?
Yeah, so the one picture I had in my presentation of the Union River estuary, that is one estuary that was restored back in 2013 by my organization and the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we've actually been counting the number of adults returning to that stream every year since the year 2000. And we had the highest return this year at the Union River of adult summer chum. So it's definitely been a really great success story and a really great opportunity for us to, actually show that the population is increasing because we are catching every salmon that goes upriver and counting it before we pass it on.
Great. Yeah, it's so nice to share those success stories and keep us all motivated for all the important work that lies ahead. So I think there's maybe just a couple more questions, then we'll wrap it up. I guess there are a couple of questions for you, Rain, that are kind of about orcas, but they relate to salmon because we want to give them the best chance at catching salmon. But what are some of the things that can be done to lower noise impact that would helps orcas and all kinds of animals?
Yeah, so the thing about noise impacting orcas is that from the research that we've done, we know that noise is most closely related to distance that vessels are from the orcas, as well as speed that orcas are traveling. So the most important thing that you can do is if you spend time in Puget Sound or in the Salish Sea on a vessel, is to be very aware of the regulations that are involved around boating around orcas. And in January 2025, that is actually going to increase to a 1,000-yard distance from southern resident orcas. And that is a distance that we know is going to provide them the best chance possible to be able to find as much prey as they can. There are some other projects in the works in the state of Washington, like going towards electric ferries and things like that. But as for right now, as for something that you can do and you can implement into your life right now, just be really aware of those regulations and make sure to always obey them.
Great. Well, to wrap up, I'm going to ask each of you to share one thing that gives you hope for salmon recovery. So think about that as I come around to you. We'll start with Mendy and then Celeste.
I will say the Climate Commitment Act. It's really great that the act will stay in place and that we will have funding for salmon habitat restoration in the future.
Great. Celeste?
Yeah, I think just how connected, or how much they connect so many people, and how important they are to everybody. There's a lot of scary stuff out there right now for them, but I think that gives me hope.
Yeah, they're important to so many people, and they help connect us and get us working collaboratively. Katie?
I was going to say something very similar to Celeste, but just thinking, everybody is so excited to learn about and see salmon. And I think that is just so wonderful. And like I've kind of already said, there's so much that we can do to help salmon. So even doing, little small things makes a difference.
All right, Rain, and then I'll let Jason wrap it up.
Yeah, so I would say something that gives me hope for salmon recovery is that salmon are so resilient. And if we take the actions that we need, such as removing dams or restoring rivers, they will come back. And that's been proven time and time again. So it's just about making those right choices for the salmon.
All right, Jason.
What gives me hope? That there's growing interest, there's growing motivation, there's people asking lots of questions. The more I learn about salmon recovery, the more I'm learning that there is this giant force that is growing even bigger that's out there to help salmon populations, not just in our part of the world, but all over.
Wonderful. Well, it's great to leave with hope and all those ideas we've heard about what we can all do to help those salmon. So that's all the time we have for this evening. Thank you again to all of our speakers. You were all amazing. So I hope some of our viewers will drop some applause emoji in the chat. So for those of you who are watching, if you want to know more about these topics, including salmon, you are in luck because we are really happy to announce we are launching a new companion podcast called Lightning Strikes Twice. We'll be going more in depth with all of the speakers that are here with us this evening. So if you submitted a question that didn't get answered tonight, we will pick many of those questions up there. And that podcast will launch in early December. We are also very excited about the upcoming episodes of this Lightning Talk series. Our next episode will be coming to you live on March 6th, and we are going to explore ocean ancients. What does that mean? You will have to tune in to find out. If you enjoyed tonight's free science event, I hope you will consider a donation to help keep programs like Lightning Talks free and accessible for all. And if you would like to watch previous programs, we have 4 seasons before this with fantastic talks. Or if you'd like to submit ideas for future topics or speakers, you can visit the Lightning Talks homepage on our website. So thank you everyone so much for joining us tonight. I hope you have a great evening and we will see you again next time.